You can try across the street. Ma'am, this is a five-star hotel. We don't hire people. Like you? The words didn't slip out. They landed like policy. Clear passer in ones. Cold in its own. Intentional. Inside the gleaming lobby of the Avalon Grand, under chandeliers and polished marble, Ashley Monroe, head of HR, stood tall in her red blazer, heels clicking with authority. She barely glanced up from her tablet as she dismissed the older black woman standing before her. Clara James wore a brown coat, worn shoes, and held a neatly folded resume. Her eyes stayed calm, but her fingers gripped the paper like a lifeline. She didn't flinch. She didn't respond. From behind the front desk, two receptionists smirked. One murmured, "Did she walk in from the bus station?" A hotel security guard nearby straightened his stance not to protect Clara, but to prepare to escort her out. Ashley waved her hand. "We've got real interviews today. You're holding up actual candidates. Unless you want security involved." Clara slowly reached into her coat pocket. Ashley flinched. "Excuse me, what are you doing?" Clara pulled out an old phone. One button, Shirenia Risen. No apps. Just a single mechanical switch. She pressed it. Upstairs in the operations control room, a small red light began to blink. Clara's voice was a whisper. Calm and final, initiate internal audit. Ashley didn't hear it. Not really. But across the lobby, a young guest, Nina Cortez, influencer and TikToker, had her phone raised, already filming. What no one in that lobby knew the woman they just mocked was about to change the names on every employee record. Starting with Ashley Monroe. Snap Start, Part 14, 2,000 characters. The velvet doors of Avalon Grand Hotel opened with a hush. Not grand. Not inviting. Just precise, the way luxury teaches silence to hide contempt. Clara James stepped inside. Her coat was plain. Nefie. Worn. She held a folder in one hand. Polished black shoes on her feet. Her graying curls tied in a bun too neat to be ignored. She walked past the crystal chandelier, past the marble lion statue, toward the concierge desk with quiet, practiced confidence. And instantly the air shifted. Behind the desk, Ashley Monroe, head of human resources, looked up from her tablet. The assistant manager beside her leaned in, whispering something under his breath. Ashley didn't respond, just narrowed her eyes and slowly removed one earbud. Clara arrived at the desk. "Good morning. I'm here for the 10 a.m. operations interview." Ashley didn't smile. "You're here for what?" Clara held up the printed email confirmation. "Interview. Diran. Janitorial operations." Ashley stared at it like Clara had just handed her a bus schedule. Then she looked Clara up and down, and the corners of her mouth twitched not with friendliness. "I'm sorry," she said, though she wasn't. "This interview is for internal applicants." Clara's eyes didn't narrow, didn't shift. They simply held. Her fingers, barely visible beneath the folder, pressed against the paper's corner, folding it once, sharply. "That wasn't in the posting," she said. Ashley gave a smile sharp enough to cut glass. "Well, we have standards here at Avalon." A young bellhop walked by with a tray of fresh towels. He glanced at Clara, hesitated, then kept moving. Ashley leaned forward, elbows on the desk. Her tone dropped just enough to sting. "And judging by your presentation, I think you might be in the wrong building. Housekeeping is through the back alley." Clara's breathing changed, not heavier, not louder, just slower, measured, anchored. From a lounge chair nearby, a woman with AirPods turned to look. A man at the espresso bar pulled his phone halfway out of his pocket. Ashley stood. "I don't know who let you through the front, but this is private property." That's when Clara's fingers reached slowly into her coat. Ashley's smile faded. The lobby held its breath. Snap Start, Part 24, 2,000 characters. Ashley Monroe, head of HR at Avalon Grand, sat behind a polished marble desk like she owned the lobby. Her red blazer was immaculate, heels crossed, eyes glued to a gleaming tablet screen. She didn't look up when she spoke again. "Experience," she said flatly. Across from her, Clara James stood in silence for a moment before answering. 20 years. Housekeeping, management, janitorial, operations." Ashley raised an eyebrow. then slowly looked up, eyes scanning Clara head to toe with visible disdain. Management in what a roadside motel. There was a beat of silence. Clara didn't respond. Her grip on her resume tightened slightly, but her voice remained even. You asked, I answered. Ashley leaned back in her chair, unimpressed. She tapped her screen again. You're not on the pre-approved list. Did someone refer you? No, Clara said calmly. I walked in. Ashley's laugh was short and cutting. That explains it. Over at the front desk, two clerks both dressed sharply in black vests and name tags exchanged smirks. One of them, Chase, leaned over and whispered to his colleague, she seriously thinks she can just walk into Avalon and get hired. She's dressed like she just came from a bus station. The other, Callie, gave a small laugh. Maybe she got lost on her way to housekeeping supplies. From the concierge counter, a young staffer named Donnie looked up. Her expression wasn't mocking, it was confused. Something about the quiet way Clara stood, the calm in her eyes, the silence, it didn't match the assumptions being made. But she said nothing. Ashley continued, now louder enough for two nearby guests pulling wheeled suitcases to glance over. Listen, Clara, right, this place is about standards. Clean, crisp, luxury presentation. Our guests expect perfection. They don't want to wonder if the janitor is a lost grandmother wandering the lobby. The words landed hard. A few heads turned. The concierge stiffened. Still, Clara said nothing. Ashley gave a fake smile. So, unless you're here to polish the brass railings out front for free, I'm going to have to ask you too. Clara slowly reached into her coat. Not aggressively, just deliberate. Ashley tensed. Excuse me, what are you doing? But Clara didn't speak. Not yet. Not until the time was right. Snap start, part 34, 2, Yasun characters. Clara's fingers wrapped around something in her coat. The front desk clerks leaned forward. Ashley straightened, not in concern, but control. Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to, but Clara was already pulling it out. Iphone de one and tananantu. Not new. No screen glare. Just matte black plastic with a single, centered silver button. She pressed it. Nothing seemed to happen. Ashley blinked. You think this is a game? From the back of the lobby, a soft electronic ding echoed. Barely audible, unless you were listening. A server paused mid-tray delivery. A guest turned their head, but Ashley didn't connect the sound. I said, this isn't your building, Clara said, for the first time, softly. Ashley stared. Excuse me. Clara looked past her. The chandeliers. The gold trim. The wall plaque etched with founded 1998, renovated 2020. Her voice was calm, almost reverent. I remember when that wall was drywall. When this lobby smelled like wet carpet, Ashley scoffed. What are you talking about? The front desk clerks laughed. One said under their breath, maybe she's having a moment. That's when Danny, the concierge, stood a little straighter. Her fingers hovered above the keyboard. Something felt off. Clara wasn't angry, wasn't begging. She was waiting. Clara looked back at Ashley. I only asked for a fair interview. You gave me something better, she said. You gave me clarity. Ashley rolled her eyes, rising to her feet now. I don't have time for riddles, ma'am. But Clara wasn't finished. Her phone buzzed once in her hand. She didn't even look at it. She just whispered, almost like a reminder to herself. 9 minutes. That's all it ever takes. Behind them, a guest had raised their phone. Recording Sereni Noman, the TikToker. Clara didn't flinch. Ashley stepped around the desk, heels clicking, and gestured to security. Please escort this woman off the property. Now. And as the guard approached, Clara did not move. The red light upstairs blinked again. Internal systems had begun logging. Something irreversible was in motion, and no one in that lobby knew it yet. Snap start, part 44, 2 Hawasoran characters. Security guard Reed, mid-40s, built like a linebacker, but with the gaze of someone who's seen too much to care, approached cautiously. He glanced at Ashley, then at Clara. You need to come with me. Ma'am. Clara didn't move. Ashley folded her arms. You're making this harder than it needs to be. This isn't a soup kitchen. From behind, a subtle ding echoed again. Danny at the concierge desk looked up, now clearly uneasy. Her screen flashed just once and then returned to normal. Clara slowly turned to Reed. I'm not resisting, but I suggest you don't touch me. Ashley laughed, too loud. Oh, please. What are you going to do? Yelp about it. Reed hesitated. Ma'am, you are causing a disruption. A man in a navy blazer stood from his seat by the window. She hasn't raised her voice once. Ashley ignored him. Call building control, she snapped. This is over, Mr. Sherber's furniture. But it wasn't. Clara's phone buzzed again. Then Danny's screen flashed once more this time. Not a flicker, but a full override. Red, then black, then a name. C. Janitor. James, executive override enabled. Danny's lips parted. She looked up slowly and saw Clara staring directly at her. I knew it, Danny whispered, just loud enough for herself. At that exact moment, Clara spoke not to Ashley, not to Reed, but into the phone she still held gently at her side. Confirm system lockout. Begin staff audit. Time-stamp this moment. Ashley's brow furrowed. What the hell are you doing? Reed took a step back. Not out of fear, but realization. Clara looked Ashley in the eye. This lobby isn't yours to defend. Then to the room, calm, unwavering. It's mine. Phones came up. Guests frozen mid-check-in now leaned closer. Danny's fingers flew across her keyboard, whispering, she's in the system. Executive level. Her name's in red. Ashley's face drained of color. And in that moment, under chandeliers and judgment, the clock hit a minute 9, and Clara James was done playing. Block 2, Conflict Escalation, Part 13, Cinematic, English, 700 characters. He wasn't scheduled. He wasn't summoned. But he arrived anyway. Richard Langston Graysuit, no tie, Black Ops badge pinned to his lapel, emerged from the staff elevator, like protocol had just bent to his will. He walked past the concierge, past the security desk, past Ashley without a glance. Clara didn't flinch. Ashley raised her voice. Sir, she forced system access. She's not even on. The Richard raised one hand. Ashley froze mid-sentence. Air grew heavy. Phones up. Sir, TikTok live. Richard stopped 3 feet from Clara. No greeting. No expression. Eyes on the red-lit device in her hand. Level 6 override, Danny whispered. Authenticated. Her name's in the system log. Richard didn't respond. Terminal 2, he said. Last 10 minutes. Every command line. Danny hesitated. That's beyond use mine. Instant. Ashley stepped in. She doesn't belong here, Ashley. Cold. Mino. Ashley backed off. Richard scanned the feed. Timestamps. Credentials Surrey. James. Orfwan. Nodalabi to Racer. Nodalabi. Input path direct access. He said nothing. Hands behind his back. Clara's phone pulsed again. Still red. Still active. Nobody breathed. Shvak hummed louder. I thought you were removed, Richard said. I returned, Clara replied. No one cleared your access. Didn't ask. Danny looked at Ashley. Ashley said nothing. Call building control, Richard said. Isolate backup channels. Cut admin relays. Clara backups were purged in October. You signed it. He turned his face. No rebuttal. I'm not here to reclaim anything, Clara said. A pause. I'm here to repair it. A bellhop reached for the entrance handle, then froze. Security watched. Monitor 3 went black. Text replaced logo, Clara James system owner override active. Nobody laughed. Nobody moved. Richard stepped back. His first concession, Block 2, Conflict Escalation, Part 23, Cinematic, English. Richard didn't speak. He tapped his earpiece twice. Langston, initiate Protocol Delta. Trace all access points. A pause. Yes, including legacy routes. His eyes never left Clara. Ashley moved behind him, silent now. The chandelier above flickered once. Then again. If Sarna did run a window, a shift in power routing. Danny's monitor refreshed. Lines of code cascaded unfamiliar. He's brute forcing the lockout, she whispered. Clara's phone stayed red. No movement. No glance. No reaction. Richard stepped closer. You used old credentials to re-enter the system. Unregistered. Unauthorized. Subway-chu determinum. Sermers stenit. Clara's voice is soft but steady. I never left the system. You were removed, he snapped. I was forgotten. Not erased. A sharp breath from a manager across the room. Security's radio crackled. Someone at the bar muttered, "What the hell is going on?" Richard raised his voice. "Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for this disruption. Please remain calm. This individual is under investigation for unauthorized access and prior misconduct." Danny's fingers froze mid-keystroke. Prior to Socorona. Clara didn't blink. "Tell them, Richard." "Say it." Richard hesitated. "Just long enough. Miss James was dismissed 3 years ago for breach of conduct, misuse of internal databases, tampering with employee files." Gasps, Kursorntun. The word terminated hit the air like static. Phone shifted. Guests whispered. Clara didn't flinch. Danny stood. "That's not in any file." Ashley barked, "Sit down." But someone in the crowd had already typed Clara James Avalon scandal into Google. Nothing came up. Richard stepped forward again. "This is a secure facility. You're jeopardizing client confidentiality and corporate protocols. You'll be escorted out." Clara raised the phone. "Calm, West, sir. Deliberate at Tonhanayuan. System integrity report queue and display." Danny's monitor changed. Green bars. Audit logs. No tampering. No breach. All clean. Silence. Ashley paled. Richard clenched his jaw. Clara looked straight at him. "You tried to bury me with silence. I came back with proof." Block 2, Conflict Escalation. Part 33, Rewritten Cinematic, No Line Breaks. Richard's jaw locked. "End her session. Force manual disconnect." Danny hesitated. "She's rude." "Override her override," he growled. "You can't." "Not without a quorum signature," Danny said. "Which includes her." Ashley stepped forward. "She's not on the board, Clara. Calm, check the registry." Danny's screen refreshed. Roles. Nerso Marmointon. Dates. Direnshermon. One entry pulsed gold. James, Clara, founder class, revoked never. The lobby shifted. A collective pause. "That's impossible," Ashley whispered. "Legacy seat," Clara said. "You buried it during restructuring." "But the bylaws stayed." Richard muttered. "You weaponized the fine print." "You taught me," she replied. The lights dimmed. Emergency protocol kicked in. Floor LEDs blinked red. "Security," Richard barked. But Reed didn't move. "I've seen this once," he said quietly. "CEO override. 6 years ago." Clara faced the lobby. "I came for a janitor's post. But I also came for truth." Richard spat. "You'll wreck this place." Clara lifted her phone. Then it was built wrong. Above them, a panel shifted. A lens dropped from the ceiling. Recording where Mashotonasarn. Real time. Clara's voice was low but unshakable. "Begin full audit." Sursobresser before one. Broadcast enabled. Timestamp now. Richard looked up. Then down. Shresarbimon. Then silent. Block 3, twist setup, 8% 200 characters, cinematic. The marble floors of Avalon had barely absorbed the tension when the next rupture began. Danny's monitor dimmed again, flickered, then stabilized. The override remained, but a new line of code appeared. Subtle, not part of Clara's command. Danny frowned. "Someone's tracing the root tree," she whispered. Upstairs in the executive observation suite, glass walls, silent climate control. One-way mirror, a shadow moved. From behind a biometric lock, a man in navy walked into the surveillance bay. Not security, not operations, legal. Comunirina. Corporate risk. With him, a medical liaison. Downstairs, Richard stepped forward. "Clara, for your safety and others, I'm invoking Clause 71B. Danny blinked. "Mental fitness protocol." Ashley snapped her fingers. "She's unstable. You saw how she walked in rambling about drywall and carpets." Richard continued, voice calm. "Per our legal obligation, we require executive override holders to pass active stability checks during system seizure. You've bypassed protocol." Clara didn't flinch. "It was your loophole." From the side, a new voice. And that loophole just closed. Enter Marla Green, Corporate Ethics Board. Uninvited. Clipboard in hand, expression unreadable. Clara turned. Still hiding behind policy, Richard. Marla interrupted. Both of you, enough. Clara, until we review this override, you're suspended from command control. The room stirred. Ashley smirked. Clara lowered her phone, slowly. You don't want the rest of the audit? Then, Richard countered, we'll take it from here. Marla added, we'll extract a shadow copy for internal evaluation. Clara's eyes didn't waver. Then extract everything. Not just the override. The purchase history, the donor list, the insider trades. The temperature shifted. Richard hesitated. What are you saying? Clara looked at Danny. Tell them what you saw before the screen locked. Danny, quiet. There was another name. Before the blackout. Ashley stiffened. Clara's tone chilled. No one buries secrets in my name. Not again. The crowd didn't cheer. They didn't gasp. They waited. Because something deeper than scandal had just been hinted at. Something still coming. And Clara knew it wasn't over. Block 4, Flashback Part 12. The scent came first: lemon polish, stale coffee, copier toner. Clara's mind blinked. The year was 1998. She was younger, hopeful, a paper resume clutched in her hands, heels scuffed from walking 10 blocks to save on bus fare. The same hotel. Avalon Grand, though, back then. Just Avalon Plaza. No chandelier. Just fluorescent panels that buzzed. The reception desk was oak, not marble, and the security guard had his feet on the counter. You're here for housekeeping, he'd asked. Not unkind, but not welcoming either. Clara nodded. First floor. Ask for Mrs. Chaffron-Warren. Heart. Clara remembered the corridor water-stained carpet, flickering exit light, the sharp scent of bleach. She'd knocked, waited, and waited. Then a manager opened the door, white shirt, blue tie, too tight smile. We filled the slot, he said, eyeing her hair. Didn't someone call you? She said no. He said sorry. He wasn't. Clara had left quietly, but something had lodged in her chest that day, a splinter of refusal that never dissolved. Block 4, Flashback Part 22. Another memory. Years later, Soirée Noire, Clara in a navy blazer. Not new, but proud. She sat across from a man with thinning hair and a desperate pitch. Avalon's upside down, he confessed. We're looking at foreclosure. One silent partner could save the brand. Clara didn't speak immediately. She just slid a check across the table. He unfolded it. Read the name, Mus. The restaurant turning. His face paled. You're that Clara, she said nothing. But her signature was already on the line. Why, he asked. She stood. Because someday, this hotel will need a soul it forgot it had. She walked out, past the same lobby, same air vents, same wall that used to leak. The receptionist didn't recognize her. No one did. But the deed was filed. The shares transferred. And Clara James became what they'd never seen coming, the quiet architect behind Avalon's second life. Block 4, Flashback Part 33. The third flash struck years after Clara had signed that check. A boardroom, polished glass table, 12 chairs, only 11 filled. Clara stood beside the 12th, her nameplate untouched C. James is silent partner. They hadn't expected her to show. Richard Langston, younger then, with a sharper smile, was presenting projections. We propose restructuring, he said, flipping to a slide labeled Operational Realignment. Clara raised her hand. Does this affect founding shares? A pause. The CFO, Marla, interjected. Only symbolically. Legacy titles remain but without binding vote unless claimed. Clara nodded. She didn't claim. Not yet. She wanted to see, and she did over the years, gradual phasing out of values she once funded. Dignity replaced by optics. Ethics buried beneath performance charts. They called it evolution. She called it forgetting. Block 5 returned to present 200 to 400 characters. The memory dissolved like vapor. Fluorescence faded back into chandeliers. Stale coffee gave way to imported espresso. And Clara James, no longer 24, no longer silent, stood beneath the same roof that once ignored her name. The lobby wasn't buzzing now. It was holding its breath. Richard stood 10 paces away, flanked by security, corporate ethics, and legal counsel. Ashley adjusted her blazer, but her fingers trembled. Danny sat motionless at her desk, one finger resting above the keyboard, waiting for the next command. Clara's phone blinked red again. One last override cued. She stepped forward, slowly, deliberately, not toward the door, but toward the gold plaque beside the guest elevator, the one no one read. Mounted high on the wall, original charter founders, Avalon Group Holdings. Her name was there. Still etched, still untouched. Ashley finally found her voice. This is harassment. You're not staff. You're not a guest. You're trespassing. Clara turned to face her, calm as still water. I built this lobby. I paid for its roof. I watched it rot from the top down. Her voice didn't rise. It landed. Richard interjected. Security has been authorized to remove. But Reed didn't move. Clara turned to him. Last time someone escorted me out, they lost their franchise license. Reed hesitated, then stepped back. Phones rose. A manager peeked from the hallway. TikTok live streams ticked upward. Clara looked to Danny. One last request. Danny nodded, almost imperceptibly. Mirror screens, Clara said. Guest display mode. System-wide. Danny tapped once. Across the lobby, every wall screen changed, rotating logo replaced with a simple black terminal window. Then, line by line, the internal audit began to scroll in public view. Ashley's jaw dropped. Clara stood center stage beneath crystal light, marble floors, and the past clawing its way into the present. And the next storm hadn't even landed yet. Block 6, Part 14-2. Teacher, issue were no characters. The audit logs filled every screen. Not graphs. Le one you one, you. Not summaries. It was raw terminal lines. Every command, every login, every deletion. The lobby guests weren't scrolling. They were reading. Ashley stepped back, mouth slightly open. Shut that off, she whispered. Danny didn't move. Richard stared at the screen. His name appeared 3 times in red. Timestamp. Authorization. Retraction. Danny, he said. Disable guest mirror mode. Immediately. I can't, she replied. Not without dual signature. Yours and... She didn't finish. Clara stepped forward. You already signed this protocol 3 years ago. Richard's throat moved, but no words followed. From the crowd, someone muttered. That's a founder-level clearance log. Another voice, it says he bypassed HR review to delete promotion data. Ashley turned white. The line of text glowed on the screen. User R. Langston. File staff advancement 2022. PDR 80 were. Action delete. Witness A. Monroe. Phones recorded. TikTok comments scrolled faster than the logs. Avalon scandal began trending. Ashley lunged toward the keyboard. Turn it off. Now. Clara didn't raise her voice. Just extended her hand. Touch that terminal, she said softly, and you'll trigger evidence lock. Ashley froze. Danny looked up. She's not bluffing. That system's wired for regulatory mirroring. Richard inhaled through his nose. This isn't how we resolve disputes, Clara. No, she agreed. This is how we reveal them. A manager at the edge of the crowd turned to another. You seeing this? Live on LinkedIn, the other whispered. And YouTube Shorts. Richard stepped forward again. End this. Quietly. Clara looked at him not with rage, but sorrow. You ended something, she said, but not quietly. Then, for the first time, she turned to the guests. My name is Clara James. I helped fund this hotel. I was erased from its history. And these, she pointed to the logs, are the hands that held the pen. Block 6, Part 24-2. 00 characters. Ashley took a step back, not out of fear, but exposure. Her image was already captured on a dozen phones, eyes wide, mouth half open. She turned to Richard, panicked. Say something. Tell them she's abusing the system. But Richard didn't speak. Because Clara's phone, still pulsing red, buzzed once more. Then stopped. Screen black. System lock complete. Danny's terminal chimed. A new window emerged. Employee review, executive class, begin. The lobby speakers crackled. Then a mechanical voice echoed. Staff evaluation process has commenced. Please stand by for real-time performance index. Everyone froze. Screens around the lobby flickered to life. Faces appeared. Name service for job titles, each with a live percentage meter. Some green, dur sökt bern. Some yellow, när was sure doing en mans. Ashley's turned orange, then dipped into red. Clara spoke clearly, her voice slicing through luxury and illusion. This isn't revenge. It's repair. I invested in people, not appearances. Ashley snapped, You don't have the right. She does, Danny interrupted. Loud enough now. Legacy override. Never revoked. One guest clapped. Another followed. Then more. Ashley turned crimson. You're destroying this brand. I'm restoring its value, Clara said. Respect doesn't come from marble and chandeliers. It starts in how you treat people when no one's watching. The entrance doors opened again. A news crew wheeled in equipment. We're live, the reporter mouthed. Ashley spun to flee, only to find security now stood in front of the exit. And Richard, he didn't move. Like a man watching a wave he could never outrun. From the crowd, a whisper rose. If a hidden file revealed your name, red or green, what would it say? Comment your color. Block 6, Part 34, do. 000 characters. Richard finally moved. Not toward Clara, but toward the center of the room. He adjusted his cuffs, straightened his spine, and turned to the guests. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, voice low, composed, rehearsed. Please allow me to clarify. But the screens didn't pause. Another line appeared. Usuro. Monroe. Rioni. Action downgrade. Staff ID 3247D. James Bashin Turkus. Reason lacks fit for front-facing roles. A murmur spread. Danny blinked at her name. Staff ID 3247. Ashley flinched. That's not real. She never even applied for. She didn't have to, Clara said. You saw her. Judged her and judged her. Labeled her. And pressed enter. Richard tried again. This audit doesn't represent full context. We have privacy agreements. No one signed silence, Clara cut in. Suddenly, the chandelier flickered. But not from power loss from cameras. Dozens of phones now pointed upward, capturing the spectacle. Danny stood. Why wasn't I ever considered for promotion? Ashley stammered. You're concierge. Danny folded her arms. And the warrant is so in one. Ashley didn't answer. Behind Clara, the entrance doors opened again. A woman in a pantsuit, mid-50s, followed by 2 legal aides, entered the lobby. Her voice cut across the space minutes. James, your counsel has arrived. Ashley's face drained of color. Richard whispered. You brought lawyers. Clara didn't look at him. I brought accountability. The woman handed Clara a document. Clara signed. Then she spoke. Not to Ashley, not to Richard, but to the room. This building forgot who built it. That ends today. Block 6, Part 44, due. 0 characters. The screen went dark. Then a single line appeared. System command execute, board vote, emergency clause 7. A second later, portraits of board members popped up. 10 faces. 9 grayed out. 1 pulsed gold Clara James active. A collective intake of breath. Ashley's lips moved, but no sound came. Richard tried again. You don't have board majority. You're right, Clara said. But you forgot Clause 7 active voting crisis overrides dormant seats. He blanched. Danny read aloud. Emergency Clause 7. In absence of quorum, founder seat may trigger vote of no confidence on executive team. Richard backed 1 step. Ashley 2. Clara pressed a button on her phone. A mechanical chime. Then manier war har function. Vote initiated. Motion terminate executive contracts are Langston and A. Monroe. Status passed. 1-1 unanimous. Ashley gasped. Richard stood frozen. The lobby erupted. Phones up. Guests cheering. Even the espresso machine hissed like it knew. Clara turned to Danny. Interim GM. Effective immediately. Danny's hand flew to her chest. Muir Nisri Warpigur. You saw people, Clara said. Not protocol. A reporter pushed closer. Mrs. Euro. James, did you plan this? Clara met their gaze. I planned to apply for a janitor job, she said. They gave me a takeover instead. Ashley's badge beeped red. Richard's phone went dark. Security didn't escort them. The crowd did. One step back, then another. Cameras followed. As they reached the door, Clara called out, Respect is not a dress code. The doors opened, and Avalon Grand exhaled. Block 7, Resolution Part 12-2. 0 characters. Ashley's heels clicked a final time against the marble floor fast, uneven, humiliated. Richard followed, stiff, defeated. The doors of Avalon Grand shut behind them, not with grace, but with judgment. Inside, silence reigned for a beat. Then it cracked. The TikToker turned their phone toward Danny, who now stood behind the front desk not as a concierge, but as acting general manager. Her fingers hovered above the terminal, eyes wide but steady. Guests applauded. Not polite claps. Real ones, wasuriuentin, rationalwayan, restorative, one. An elderly man in a tweed jacket stepped forward. You miss, he said, pointing at Clara. Just made history. And I saw it live. Clara gave a small nod, but said nothing. Her focus remained on Danny. First order of business, Clara said. Purge the blacklist system. No more automatic downgrades based on fit. Maris Subranon. Danny nodded, fingers flying across the keyboard. One by one, profile statuses refreshed. Orange turned green. Red disappeared. Clara's name now appeared in bold not as applicant, but founder, executive active. Behind her, the new interim HR assistant, someone Ashley had ignored all year, approached slowly. Should I alert corporate? Clara turned. No, they already know. At that moment, a row of small email notifications began lighting up on Danny's screen. Subject line statement request, interview opportunity, feature proposal. All from media outlets. CNN, Arsha, Forbes, Nurasitspakabs, even Good Morning America. Clara, Danny said quietly, the world's watching. Clara glanced at the lobby. The people, the plaque she once helped pay for. Then let's give them something worth watching. Block 7 Resolution, Part 22-2. See you where you're. 0 characters. Danny opened the staff-wide announcement system. Her hands trembled, but not from fear. She glanced at Clara. Clara gave a single nod. Danny tapped record. Her voice echoed through every hallway, every staff room, every corner of Avalon Grand. Effective immediately, all personnel evaluations will be reviewed. No more anonymous flags. No more hidden filters. This hotel moves forward with transparency, respect, and truth. Applause broke out again. Downstairs in the service corridor, janitors paused. Cooks turned from their stations. A groundskeeper leaned on his broom, smiling through tears. In the HR office, a clerk who once kept quiet when Ashley berated a staffer stood and deleted the last auto-rejection folder. Outside, reporters were now interviewing guests on the steps of the hotel. She didn't just fire them, a woman said into a mic. She rewrote the power structure in real time. Back inside, Danny looked to Clara. What next? Clara walked to the brass plaque mounted near the entrance. It still read Avalon Grand Hotel, a legacy of excellence. She turned to Danny. Get maintenance. A forny. For what? We're changing that. Half an hour later, guests and employees gathered as a new plate was screwed into place. It read, Respect walks in before resume. ETC. James, founding partner. Phones up. Photos snapped. Hashtags born. Clara stepped back, arms crossed. For the first time that day, she smiled. Behind her, Danny handed out new orientation packets. Printed across the top, Avalon Reimagined Building, Hospitality with Honor. Block 8, Lesson in Positive Change, Part 12-2. 0 characters. 3 days later, Avalon Grand didn't just look different, it felt different. The lobby music changed. Softer, one-iwapper. Live jazz replaced sterile piano loops. The concierge desk was lowered slightly, no longer looming above guests. And behind it, Danny stood new name tag General Manager D. Carter. She didn't wear heels. She wore flats, and she smiled with her eyes, not just her lips. Near the elevator, a new staff member struggled with her tablet. Clara approached now in simple black slacks, blue blouse, badge clipped to her belt. "Need a hand?" she asked. The young man looked up, startled. "You're William, the one who, let's just say I stuck around long enough to help out." Together, they fixed the login issue. No orders, no titles, just teamwork. Upstairs in the training room, Clara entered quietly. Inside, 20 new hires sat in rows. Housekeeping, kitchen staff, maintenance. Services was returnisher. Danny stood at the front, projector glowing. "This isn't about mopping floors," she said. "It's about lifting dignity." Clara watched from the back. One janitor raised his hand. "Will we really have a voice now?" Danny turned, met Clara's eyes, then looked back. "Yes." Starting with this room. In the hallway, someone had hung a framed photo not of a CEO, but of the entire staff, taken that morning. Under it, "People before protocol." Outside, guests snapped photos with the new plaque. The hashtag Clara effect trended in 3 states. But Clara didn't check Twitter. She was too busy helping a bellhop pick up a toppled luggage cart. Block 9, call to action 2. 400 characters. At sunset, Avalon Grand's facade caught gold light not from wealth, but from warmth. Clara stood at the sidewalk, watching guests walk in. Not one of them looked confused anymore. Not one paused to judge a coat or a posture. They simply entered. A girl approached with her father, the same girl who once watched her single dad be denied an application by a now-fired manager. Clara knelt beside her. "Starting school?" she asked. The girl nodded. "5th grade. 5th grade." Clara handed her a small envelope. Inside, a scholarship letter. "Education walks through every door you open," Clara said softly. The girl smiled. Her father wiped his eyes. Behind them, new signage glowed on the glass. "Avalon Grand, where respect walks in first." Across the street, a reporter turned to camera. What began as an overlooked interview has become a hospitality revolution. Clara James, once rejected at this very lobby, now leads the change she once begged for. Guests passed, cameras paused. No one rushed Clara. No one needed to. She'd already said everything through action. And so, we say to you, stay until the end. The twist will redefine what redemption truly means. If you witnessed injustice like this, would you stay silent or take action? Tell us below. Subscribe to Unveiled Wealth, where kindness sparks redemption and silence breaks power.